Hey there, good to have you here. Today we're diving into something that's been sparking serious debate, and it goes way beyond politics or media bias. President Trump is once again pushing to eliminate federal funding for PBS and NPR. And while that might seem like a typical budget move out of D.C., the reality is it hits at the heart of how Americans, especially in rural areas, get their information, their education, and even their emergency updates. Think back to those early mornings watching Sesame Street, or maybe you still catch All Things Considered on your way to work. This isn't just about TV or radio, this is about what kind of country we want to be when it comes to making information available to everyone, regardless of where they live or how much they earn. So what's actually going on? Let's break it down. The Trump administration wants to rescind $1.1 billion in funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the organization that funnels federal support to local PBS and NPR stations. Now, these national networks don't rely heavily on government money. NPR only gets about 1% of its funding that way, and PBS gets closer to 15%, but it's the local affiliates that depend on this money to survive. And for a lot of those local stations, especially in rural America, CPB support can make up a full 10% of their budget. Losing that isn't just a financial challenge, it could be the final blow. In fact, past internal reports have shown that as many as 18% of public radio stations could shut down if this federal funding disappears. That could affect nearly 30% of NPR listeners in underserved regions, like parts of Alaska or the Midwest, where public media is often the only consistent source of news. So, why the cut now? While money is part of it, the administration has made it clear this is also about content. Officials have accused NPR and PBS of spreading what they call woke propaganda. They've pointed to specific programs, like a PBS children's show featuring a drag queen or NPR coverage of gender identity, as evidence that these platforms are no longer neutral. Russell Vought, head of the Office of Management and Budget under Trump, even called NPR and PBS a front line in the culture war on Steve Bannon's podcast. So it's not just a funding debate, it's a reflection of a growing ideological rift about what public broadcasting should be. This clash came to a head recently when leaders from both networks testified before Congress. Republican lawmakers grilled them over editorial choices, while Democrats stood firm in support of public media's mission. NPR CEO Catherine Maher and PBS President Paula Kerr warned that these funding cuts wouldn't just hurt their organizations, they'd hurt communities across the country, especially the ones who rely on local stations for weather alerts, civic updates, school board meetings, and more. But the debate doesn't end there. Critics of public media argue it's time to move on. They point out that in 2025, we have countless other options: YouTube, podcasts, cable news, online articles. They argue that NPR and PBS should learn to survive like other outlets, through advertising, donations, or subscriptions. To them, this isn't about censorship, it's about leveling the playing field and making sure media organizations don't get special treatment from taxpayers. Some conservatives also say they're tired of seeing their tax dollars support platforms they feel don't represent their values. If NPR leans left, and if PBS features topics they disagree with, why should they be forced to help fund that? That frustration has been brewing for years and taps into a larger distrust in institutions that's been growing across the country. Groups like the Heritage Foundation argue that public broadcasting has shifted too far from its original mission of neutrality. They see it as serving a liberal, urban elite audience while asking for support from people who don't feel seen or heard by its coverage. But defenders of public media push back just as hard. They say this shared funding model is exactly what gives NPR and PBS their independence from corporate influence. It's what allows shows like PBS NewsHour, Fresh Air, or Sesame Street to focus on substance over profit, education over entertainment. And even if you personally don't watch or listen, there's a broader question at play. Should we continue to support things that benefit society as a whole, even if we don't use them every day? It's like libraries, public schools, or even the fire department. You may not visit the library weekly, but it still plays a vital role in your community. The same logic applies here. If you live in a major metro area, you might not notice these cuts right away. Larger stations usually have more resources and can lean more on donors or corporate underwriting. But for rural towns and isolated regions, where broadband access is still shaky and local newspapers have dried up, public media is often the only lifeline. Cutting this funding doesn't just mean fewer programs, it means less connection, fewer stories about your community, and less access to trusted information that isn't filtered by an algorithm or dictated by ad revenue. At the end of the day, this is about what we choose to invest in. Do we believe that non-commercial, publicly funded media still has a role in our country? Or are we ready to let it fade away unless it can compete like every other business? I'd love to hear your take. Have you ever turned to NPR during a power outage? Watched PBS Kids with your children? Relied on your local public station for school news or weather alerts? Drop a comment and let me know what you think. And hey, if you value clear, respectful conversations about public policy and how it affects real people, go ahead and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me. Catch you next time.